Welcome, everybody. Let's take our seats and get going. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082, we are looking at a study of the spring 2018 reports of the Auditor General of Canada. And before we get started, I want to recognize that we're on the unceded territory of the Algonquin people, an important tribute and recognition of our history and our process of reconciliation with our Indigenous peoples of Canada. So, welcome to our committee. We look forward to hearing from you and the responses from department officials. MP MacLeod.
I note that only an hour was scheduled, and of course with two departments, the Auditor General, that leaves perhaps one person that can question a very limited round. And I would hope that perhaps with the I know we don't have a lot of in-camera business. I hope the officials might be available for a little extra time just so that we could have a few more rounds. It is very typical practice that there's a little bit more than 1 hour that's dedicated towards, as I say, so much important departments and important reports. So I hope that there would be consideration to the officials to staying and to continue, and I think certainly 30 minutes of committee business would be plenty.
MP Bossio.
Yes, and as much as I respect my honourable colleagues' viewpoint on this, and if we had discussed this previously up front and prior to sitting at the table, then maybe we may have been able to consider that. But I think we, in fairness to the officials, we had said that this would be a 1 hour meeting. They're prepared for that. We do have committee business afterwards, and I think that we should stick to the schedule that we'd already established. Thank you.
All right. Time to get started for presentations. We're going to provide, we have 3 groups. Each one will have up to 10 minutes, and I'll provide you some signals when you're getting close to the end of your allotted time. All right, so I don't have to cut you off in midstream. All right, the first to present is the Office of the Auditor General. Welcome, and you can start when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, on behalf of the Auditor General, I wish to express his regret at not being able to be here today. Madam Chair, thank you for this opportunity to present the results of 2 audits from our spring 2018 reports. One audit was on the socio-economic gaps on First Nations reserves, and the other was on employment training for Indigenous people. Joining me today are Joe Martir, Principal, and Maria Pooley, Director. Le Bureau du Vérificateur Général du Canada.
The Office of the Auditor General of Canada has a long history of auditing federal programs and activities that affect Indigenous peoples. Although successive governments have made numerous commitments to improve the well-being of Indigenous people, I am sorry to report that our decades of audits indicate that the results of the programs for Indigenous peoples have been unacceptable. As you will see from the findings of the 2 recent audits we are discussing here today, recurring issues include the lack of information and the poor use of available data to understand and improve the impact the programs have on the lives of First Nations. In the first audit, we assessed Indigenous Services Canada's progress and reporting on closing the socio-economic gaps between on-reserve First Nations people and other Canadians. We also focused on whether the department made adequate use of data to improve education programs, and this with a view to closing the education gap and improving socio-economic well-being.
The department's main measure of socio-economic well-being on reserves, the Community Well-being Index, wasn't comprehensive. While the index included Statistics Canada data on education, employment, income, and housing, it omitted several aspects of well-being that are also important to First Nations, such as health, environment, language, and culture. We also found that the department didn't adequately use the large amount of program data provided by First Nations or other available data to ensure and report on whether the lives of people on First Nations reserves were improving. For example, the department didn't adequately measure and report on the education gap. Using the education data collected by the department, we calculated that the gap in levels of high school graduation or the equivalent between on-reserve First Nations people and other Canadians widened between 2001 and 2016. We also found that First Nations had limited access to the department's education information system, despite the government's commitments made in 2008 to give them access to information in the system. Indigenous Services Canada also made poor use of the education data it collected to improve education results. For example, the department spent $42 million over 4 years to prepare First Nations students to enter post-secondary education programs. However, we found that only 8% of those enrolled actually completed this preparatory program. Despite these poor results, the department didn't work with First Nations or educational institutions to improve the success rate. We found that the department didn't report on most of the education results it had committed to report on over the past 18 years to determine whether progress was being made to close the gap. For example, it didn't report on student attendance or the delivery of First Nations language instruction. We also found that the department's public reporting of First Nations education results was inaccurate. Nous avons conclu que Service aux Autochtones Canada n'avait pas.
We concluded that Indigenous Services Canada did not satisfactorily measure or report on Canada's progress in closing the socioeconomic gaps between on-reserve First Nations people and other Canadians. We also concluded that the use of data to improve education programs was inadequate. Our second audit examined how Employment and Social Development Canada managed two programs: the Aboriginal Skills and Employment Training Strategy and the Skills in Partnership Fund. The common goal of these two programs was to increase the number of Indigenous people who had sustainable and meaningful employment. For both of these programs, the department worked with Indigenous organizations across the country that provided training and employment support to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit clients. Overall, we found that the department could not demonstrate that these programs increased the number of Indigenous people who got jobs and stayed employed. Specifically, we found that the department did not define the performance indicators necessary to demonstrate whether the programs were meeting their objectives. For example, the department established an annual target for the number of clients employed after receiving services. However, the department counted any employment obtained as a successful outcome, whether the work was short-term, seasonal, part-time, or full-time. This means that it did not know how successful the programs were in helping clients find sustainable employment.
Didn't do enough to ensure the completeness and accuracy of the data it obtained from Indigenous organizations on the results their clients had achieved after receiving services. Notably, the department didn't know whether more than 20% of all clients who received services actually found a job or went back to school. We found that the department didn't analyze the program data it collected to identify trends, problems, or good practices that could help Indigenous organizations improve their services and results. For example, the department spent $130 million between the 2010-11 and 2016-17 fiscal years on wage subsidies for employers who hired clients for specific lengths of time. However, the department didn't track whether these clients continued working after the subsidies had ended. In addition, the department didn't consistently monitor Indigenous organizations to ensure that they fulfilled their obligations under funding agreements, nor did it use the information from the monitoring it did to know how well the programs were working. This means that the department missed the opportunity to explore ways to improve program delivery and to identify systemic issues requiring attention. Après le dépôt en mai de nos rapports au Parlement,
Following the tabling of our reports in Parliament in May, Indigenous Services Canada and Employment and Social Development Canada each prepared an action plan to address our recommendations. Your committee may wish to ask them for an update on the implementation of their commitments. Madam Chair, this concludes my opening statement. We would be pleased to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Indigenous Services, Department of Indian Affairs and Northern Development, I think officially it's called, but we know you as Indigenous Services.
Madam Chair, I want to begin by expressing my thanks to the committee for inviting us today and join the discussion. I want also to thank you for acknowledging that we are gathered on the traditional and unceded Algonquin territory. Madam Chair, my colleagues and I welcome the Office of the Auditor General's Sprint Report on Socioeconomic Gaps in Education Data for First Nations on Reserve. Service Autochtone Canada souscrit aux 3 recommandations qui sont formulées dans le rapport.
Further, Indigenous Services Canada agrees with the 3 recommendations in the report that pertain to our department.
Provide the committee with a brief overview of the department's progress in addressing those recommendations, after which I would be pleased to take your questions. In offering our response, we are mindful of the Government of Canada's determination to forge a renewed relationship with Indigenous people and the need to ensure our initiatives as a department support the ultimate goal of self-determination. Cela comprend le contrôle par les Premières Nations de leur
This includes First Nation control of First Nation education, the call for which has been delivered to the Government of Canada time and again for decades.
Partners to achieve this goal, to address the key issues from enhancing First Nations capacity to establish educational institutions that will deliver quality, culturally appropriate programs and services for children, to ensuring First Nations have the sufficient and predictable funding needed to maintain and improve their education system over long term. Turning to the recommendations themselves, the first emphasize the importance of working with First Nation and other partners to measure and report on overall socioeconomic well-being of First Nations on reserve. This includes looking at broader indicators of socioeconomic well-being that have been identified by First Nations themselves, such as language and culture. Dans un premier temps, nous collaborons déjà.
As a first step, we are collaborating with partners including the Assembly of First Nations and the First Nations Information Governance Centre on a proposed national outcome-based framework.
Today, a draft of what we call the national framework. We want and need a mechanism that will enable us to identify with a high degree of confidence that there is a rightly termed, that what are rightly termed the unacceptable gaps that exist in living standards, education, and health between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples in this country. This is essential if we are to know whether we are making progress in closing that gap. The framework would align with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, ensuring a comprehensive dashboard of all the outcomes and key indicators associated with socioeconomic well-being, including language and culture. This is crucial to informing our work with Indigenous people. Working together, we aim to have comprehensive baseline data on socioeconomic gaps within 3 years. With a baseline in place and the experience and knowledge gained in creating that baseline, we will have the tools we need to measure and provide meaningful reports of our progress towards closing the gaps. I would emphasize that the committee that we are not proposing to do this on our own. We are committed to a respectful, collaborative process in developing the framework based on the recognition that First Nations perspectives are essential to defining meaningful socioeconomic indicators. The second recommendation flows from the first, working in partnership with First Nations to collect, use, and share data to support improved outcomes on education on reserve. Encore une fois, ces travaux sont déjà en cours.
Again, this work is already in progress.
Identify the indicators associated with education results that are most meaningful to First Nations themselves. In some cases, and perhaps many cases, these indicators will replace what we currently measure. I would note that this work supports the movement toward First Nations control. First Nation will collect the data. First Nation will report to their communities. An essential step here is strengthening First Nation data governance capacity. As the committee is aware, as part of establishing the new fiscal relationship, Budget 2018 committed to support First Nation Information Governance Center in the design of the National Data Governance Strategy in coordination of efforts to establish regional data governance centers for First Nations. J'insiste sur le fait que l'appui à une stratégie nationale de gouvernance.
I stress that support for a national strategy for data governance does not equate to a one-size-fits-all approach to First Nation data, including education.
Approaches in order to respect the diversity of First Nation communities across the country. I'm pleased to say that in December last year, the Assembly of First Nations ratified the joint policy work that has been undertaken with First Nations toward the development of a new K-12 education policy. This policy will act as a guide for the development and implementation of regional approaches to First Nations education, including improvements in data collection, use and sharing, as well as mutual accountability. I would draw the committee's attention to the recent tripartite education agreement in British Columbia as an example of this approach, a comprehensive regional education agreement with First Nation and other partners that will help to ensure everyone is on the same page when it comes to what we measure and how we measure it. A third recommendation underscored the need to ensure reporting of education results is complete and accurate. Comme le fait remarquer le vérificateur général,
as the AG has noted, while the department's reports on graduation rates have been accurate, there is room for improvement in regard to the meaningful part.
Meaningful comparison of secondary graduation rates on a national basis has been a problem for some time. Provinces have jurisdictions over the education system, including success measures. Each province, for example, has different ways of determining a graduation rate. In addition, many First Nation students finish high school somewhere other than in their own communities or finish high school as a mature student, successes that are not necessarily captured in reports. Our education transformation work includes developing a new result framework that will generate reports that are both accurate and meaningful. In conclusion, Madam Chair, my department welcomes and agrees with the recommendation from the Auditor General, which in many ways endorsed the work already underway to transform First Nation educations, including collaborating with First Nations and other partners to gather, use, and share data that will enable accurate measures of existing socio-economic gaps and the success of our efforts to close those gaps. Je vous remercie de votre attention et je suis maintenant prêt à répondre à vos questions.
Thank you, and I'm ready to entertain your questions.
And we have the Department of Employment and Social Development, which funds many Indigenous programs, individuals, for education and training. And so we're very interested in your update. And in fact, our next study that we're going to be doing is going to be looking at capacity building. So you might be a regular participant in our committee. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm here with my colleague Stephanie Hébert, and we would like to begin by thanking you and all the members of the Standing Committee for this opportunity, and also by acknowledging that we are gathered on traditional unceded Algonquin territory. We welcome the Auditor General's report on employment training for Indigenous people. Its recommendations are about 2 labour market programs, the Aboriginal Skills and Employment Training Strategy that I will refer to with the acronym ASSETS, and the Skills and Partnership Fund, or SPF. Nous acceptons ces recommandations et avons déjà
We accept these recommendations and have already undertaken major steps to improve conditions for Indigenous peoples.
I'd like to provide some important context. We know that skills and employment gaps between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people continue to persist. No one understands the effect of these gaps better than the Indigenous service delivery providers we work with through ACITS and SPF. To realize results and reduce these gaps in meaningful ways, we have to move beyond a one-size-fits-all pan-Canadian, pan-Indigenous approach and respectfully recognize that Indigenous people understand their own needs best. The government has been clear and consistent in its commitment to reconciliation through a renewed nation-to-nation, government-to-government, and Inuit-Crown relationship based on the recognition of rights, respect, cooperation, and partnership. That is why in Budget 2018, we saw new investments, $2 milliards sur 5 ans et 408,2 millions de dollars.
$2 billion over 5 years in continued funding, which is a 99% increase for training programs as skills training for Indigenous peoples. This new program is based on in-depth consultations and approach
Of this new approach with our Indigenous partners. And in my remarks, I will point to how the recommendations in the report are already being integrated into the new ISET program, which was announced in the budget. Madam Chair, ACITS is a unique grants and contribution program. It is fully driven by Indigenous service delivery organizations. They make the decisions on how to design and deliver programming based on the individual needs and priorities of their clients and their communities in line with the program terms and conditions. As for the Strategic Partnership Fund, ce programme a eu d'importants impacts, touchant plus de 305.
This program has had a major impact affecting more than 375,000 Indigenous people, 600 service points.
A continually growing population, the Indigenous service providers have managed to deliver a program that is responsive, flexible, and innovative in addressing a broad range of local economic conditions and the varying needs of their clients. The Skills and Partnership program is a demand-driven, partnership-based program which is designed to provide training to employment for Indigenous peoples for jobs identified by employers. It focuses on emerging or untapped economic development opportunities to meet the needs of high-demand sectors and areas with skill shortages. A 2015 ACETS and Skills and Partnership Fund evaluation, which built on 10 previous evaluations of this programming, demonstrated positive and lasting results, including an increase in average annual income of $1,600 and improved employability for program participants. The Auditor General's report focused on ESDC's management of the program. We take this seriously, and as I said, we accept the findings which identified important areas for improvement in our management. But I must also say that we are pleased to see that the report did not question the Department's financial monitoring and quality assurance standards, nor the management role of Indigenous service delivery organizations. Les conclusions du rapport peuvent être regroupées.
The report's findings can be grouped in two themes: performance measures and program management.
ESDC is working in collaboration with Indigenous organizations to develop a new performance measurement strategy, which will include strengthened indicators, clearly defined targets, and enhanced reporting on post-program results. Just a few weeks ago, over 150 representatives from Indigenous service delivery organizations participated in a national data workshop to discuss capturing indicators of success for the new ISET program. This new strategy will allow the government and partners to measure how the program benefits Indigenous peoples and their communities. The second theme of the report is program management, which includes the funding allocation model, the provision of labor market information, and monitoring. Madame la Présidente, le ministère travaille avec les organisations autochtones.
Madam Chair, because of our work with Indigenous organizations, we have found ways to get funding and provide services. This component of funding would vary from community to community.
Accurate labor market information to our Indigenous service delivery partners. We are creating distinctions-based working groups to determine the kinds of labor market information and analysis that will be most useful to these organizations going forward. More specifically, we have already begun working with First Nations on a pilot to address gaps in their information over the next 3 years. It will enable us to develop tailored information and skills inventories in up to 60 communities. We are also working with Indigenous partners on the renewal of our risk management model to better assess and enhance the capacity of Indigenous organizations. This will ensure monitoring is consistent and can better inform program and service delivery. De plus, le nouveau modèle de gestion des risques mettra en place le soutien nécessaire.
Further, the risk management system will help us come to auxiliary agreements and better results.
We see this as an opportunity for all of us to continue working in partnership to ensure programs provide Indigenous people with the supports they need to succeed. Je vous remercie encore une fois de nous avoir.
I'd like to thank you once again for having invited us today. I'm happy to work with the Auditor General's Office in order to achieve our common objectives. Thank you.
We're moving to the questioning period of the hearing, and it starts with MP Bosio.
Thank you, Chair, and thank all of you for being here today. We appreciate your presence, and we know we're taking away from your very busy lives trying to support our community, so we do appreciate that. My first question is for the Office of the Auditor General. We know from First Nations that there is a need to take a more holistic approach to understanding overall well-being of First Nations on reserve, and this applies to education through improvements in language and culture programs for students. It would be great to get an understanding from you, based on your work on this report, on how that could perhaps be measured or tracked for progress by partners. And secondly, as part of your report, you made the recommendation that the department's reporting on First Nations education results should be complete and accurate. Seeing as the key mandate for of the Minister of Indigenous Services and Crown Indigenous Relations is the advancement of self-determination, and in this instance, First Nations control of education delivery, what do you think that looks like moving forward in terms of successful design and delivery of education by and for First Nations, and any subsequent decisions about how to measure success?
Madam Chair, that's a lot in a very short question. I'll start with the last part of the honourable member's question, which is about self-determination and education. And it seems to me that we Canada and the First Nations are going to continue to go through a period of transition to self-government and a government model of education. And once the government model of education, wherein the First Nations assume jurisdictional responsibility for education, occurs, the relationship between the federal government and the First Nations will be more akin to that between the federal government and the province. And the relationship will be more, and the funding relationship will become more like a transfer of funding from the federal government to the First Nations government. In the interim, when we do our audit, what we are auditing is a federal program with particular objectives attached to it that takes place within a contribution agreement setting that has terms and conditions attached to it. It's not an ideal situation to promote, from my perspective, to promote self-government, as it forces the attention of the community and the people who are organizing and trying to deliver education from focus on the community and the children to a focus on the terms and conditions of the agreement and meeting reporting requirements to the federal government. In the transition, we'll have to find a way, and I think my colleagues at Indigenous Services are working on the transition from sort of a contribution-based agreement to a more of a government-based agreement and have, in fact, as I understand it, signed in BC, an agreement that, if it is not a jurisdictional-based agreement, is one that will help the transition to a more government-based agreement. I hope that's answered the member's question on the second part of the question. On the first part of the question, perhaps I'll ask my colleague Joe Martir, who was the principal responsible for the audit, to talk more specifically about the points on tracking.
Thank you.
I'll start off by saying that in terms of going forward, as auditors, we tend to look backwards. So we can talk about what actually happened. So from things that didn't go well that could be improved on. So when we talk about the measuring well-being, obviously the Community Well-being Index, we recognized that it has certain components, but it's not a comprehensive measure. And the department has known that for many, many years. And the other component of that is that despite knowing that, up until the most recent initiatives, we're talking about 18 years, there hasn't been any attempt to make it more comprehensive or come up with another index that's more comprehensive. And in that index, as we state in the report, there wasn't any real meaningful engagement with the First Nations to develop those index. So I'm glad to hear that going forward, they are doing that so that both sides know what should be included and how it's going to be used. With respect to education, again, the department 20 years ago basically committed to reporting on the education gap and how it was closing. They've never done that. We used their own data to show what you can see on graph on Exhibit 5.1, that in fact the gap had widened over those years. So again, that's information that the department has had. So from our point of view, we tried to demonstrate in the report how they can use the information going forward. And I think they're doing that, but time will tell whether they're successful.
Much. Okay, I'll move to ESDC. Thank you. It's the first time you've been before our committee, so we do appreciate your presence here today. The Auditor General's report states, overall, we found that Employment and Social Development Canada did not collect the data or define the performance indicators necessary to demonstrate whether the Aboriginal Skills and Employment Training Strategy and the Skills and Partnership Fund were meeting their common overall objective of increasing the number of Indigenous people who had sustainable and meaningful employment. This is despite the fact the department has been delivering programs to support Indigenous employment for almost 30 years. Can you please explain your data collection methods and what you are doing to address the problem identified by the Auditor General?
Yes, thank you for the question. So it is true that since 2010, we have monitored progress in terms of number of clients served, returns to work, and returns to school. And we recognize the limitations of that approach. And particularly with perspective to measuring longer-term impacts and sustainable employment. That's why in the new program that's co-developed with Indigenous partners, we are shifting the emphasis on the objective and the target to reducing the skills gap between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples by 50% and the employment gap by 25%. We're responding to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to Action 7 that called upon the federal government to develop with Indigenous groups a joint strategy to eliminate educational employment gaps. We also are co-developing the new indicators, as I mentioned in my remarks, to ensure that the outcomes of the program are meaningful to the communities and the organizations that deliver it.
Moving on to MP Kevin Waugh.
To all of the officials here today. I'm a little disappointed we didn't get this draft as it was presented last week in another committee. So when you table it here in front of us, knowing that you would have come to this committee today, I would have appreciated this a little bit earlier. It's good information, it's a draft, but I think you can see we got a 30-second view of it, and it's not very good. Well, education, we spend more. Your department spends more on education than anything else. $2.1 billion for 107,000 that we know of in this country going to school. We have another 24,000 or so in post-secondary education. We know this data for years has been flawed. I could have told you this I've been a trustee in Saskatchewan for 10 years. I was on the school board. I didn't have to come here to look at this data here today. I knew long ago this data was flawed. Absolutely. It's still flawed today, to be honest with you. I see it because I see grade 3 reading results. We haven't even talked about the reading results. It's grade 3. Yeah, you, Mr. Tremblay, because if you can't read by grade 3, you're done. We all know that. Every school board in this country is trying to get kids to read at or above grade level in grade 3. And if it doesn't happen, no data here supports that. Nothing. So why do you think we're failing in our graduation results? It goes back to grade 3. And we have no results from anywhere that would support this. Quickly. I've got time's running out. So why aren't we talking about grade 3 reading levels?
Thanks, Madam Chair, for the questions. You're right, grade 3 is important, but I would...
It's the most important.
I would go even before. I would go through prenatal programs towards actually young adult programs. I mean, when we talked about result on education, it's not just about the system of education, it's about the socio-economic gaps, as the Auditor General pointed out, and that includes a lot of different elements and factors. You can have a great education system. If you don't have good conditions, it's not necessarily going to be great.
Data.
And you need data.
You got to have it. There's no data here for grade 3. Yeah.
Give some time for the response. Okay.
What we've been measuring in the past was effectively a graduation level that is based on the cohort at year 12. You're right. And that's not the ideal one.
No.
And we agree with this. But we also agree on our side that we need to sit down and work with First Nations on what is meaningful for them to measure. We don't want to necessarily come with one-size-fits-all approach from Ottawa and say this is the way to do that. And that's what we've been doing. So the agreement we renewed, for example, in BC that was mentioned before, we sat down with them and we now have an agreement on a set of data that's going to be measured over the next few years, and that will attest of success or failure of the system or what needs to be improved in the system. But it's only the education system. We need more than that. So there was...
We're just talking education here today.
Yeah, okay. But I was just referring to the community well-being index. But you're right. On education, that's the way we're going. In the past, we've been struggling in terms of collection of data at the federal government, and you know that more than me. And I think we've made progress in terms of collecting the information, having it actually in our system. The problem is the interpretation, is the analysis of the data, and it's also making sure that the data are actually used by First Nation themselves, and that's where we're moving now.
You know, we're not even tracking students.
Yeah.
And that's why you're getting flawed data on your graduation rates. I might quit in grade 10. You don't know where I end up. I might have gone off reserve into an urban community. You're not even tracking anyone. So how would you know at the end of the day, instead of, let's say, from grade 10, 11, 12, 3 years I graduate, it might take me 5 or 6 years. Doesn't matter. I'm still finishing over that line, graduation, grade 12. We have no tracking of students in this.
Yeah, it's a very good point, and that's a challenge that we have when we mention that people don't graduate or drop out. We've got cases potentially of people, you're right, moving off reserve, going into the provincial system, and as soon as they go into the provincial system and I don't fund them, it means that I'm losing track of them. So I don't know what's going on. I cannot say that they fail. I don't want to say that they succeed because I don't know. And there are issues like that. And you're right. We also believe that there could be people who actually will drop out for a few years, maybe come back to the school. You're right. The best way would be to identify the people and making sure, but to do that, we need to do it with the organizations, and we need to sit down with provinces because we don't have access to necessarily the provincial tracking system. When I was in a provincial system...
Well, that's a flaw then.
That's a flaw. They were tracking me, and they knew even if I was moving from one place to another place where I was. But that's not the case in
I saw it in urban Saskatchewan. We had students come off reserve. They come into the city. They go back to the reserve later. We tracked them, and then they're gone.
Yeah.
They're just gone. The other thing, how can we get engaged Inuit and Métis and First Nation students engaged when we don't know if they show up or not? We have no tracking of attendance. Everybody in Canada does the first thing at 9 o'clock or 8:30 when they get there. We'll go down by road, they're here. There's no attendance. So when I go up north, Johnny hasn't been there for 10 days. Does someone phone Johnny's parent or find out where he is? You know, this is academic stuff that if we don't take attendance, if we don't track, this will never get fixed. You'll be back here time and time again with these flawed results. They'll never get fixed. They have to show up in school, and we got to track them. And we're not doing it still. And this system isn't working. You've got a system, you said, in BC, but how am I going to pull their results with Nova Scotia? I have to have, at the end of the day, look at the whole country and say, this program is working, and that's not working. You know, so how at the end of the day we're going to say, this is a good system, how can we fit this nationwide? Because we do have to have a nationwide policy on this.
We are looking, at the moment we're working at the regional level, we expect and suspect that they would be common indicators across the country at the end. When we talk with BC, for example, the tendency graduation was there, and we think that others will actually come with indicators that are similar, but they could be differences for sure.
You should demand it.
MP Jolibois.
Thank you very much. I'm really dismayed and disheartened with what I'm hearing today from both departments and the federal government. We are talking about the lives of First Nations children and young people. Who aspires to become something or someone with the supportive services? You ought to be ashamed of yourselves, because it hurts me. It really hurts me when I go into the constituency and I go on the reserve and I hear a young person who has no place to live, the school they go to is run down and they don't have enough equipment. Canada is a rich country. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. This is really pathetic, and it's really upsetting to me. How can both departments, even to the Truth and Reconciliation, have you guys read both departments? Have you read both departments? And you have. And yet you struggle with getting measurements to improve lives of our young children and young teenagers, from education to language and to culture. How can you sit there and talk about relationship building when you guys are lacking the human kindness, even making improvements? I have no faith in the system, and it's breaking my heart. How can you sit there and even talk about the young person who is going to school and not being tracked? What do you say to that, both of you?
Let me answer to that, and I won't comment on your comments on my kindness. What I would come back on is what we're doing on education regarding the funding. For example, when you say those people don't have the capacity or they don't have the money and they don't have the tools on reserve, we have now worked with the Assembly of First Nations, with the regional chiefs. Over 14 months, we developed a funding formula for education that is Provincial Plus. And it has been agreed by First Nation leaders, and this formula guaranteed that there is as much money on reserve that there is off reserve, and add up some elements, including special education, language and culture, and of course kindergarten. So we actually are moving in that direction. That's what we're doing. We understand that there's three big elements that needs to be addressed. One is the impact.
And how long will that take?
It's there. It's there.
Direct your question through the chair instead of directing it directly at our guests.
The new funding formula is going to be in place in April 2019, so that's less than a year from now. So we're working with First Nations on developing their own system. We've got 2 school boards that have been created over the last 2 years. Regarding data, I agree with you, we need more data, but we have to do it, we believe, with First Nation, because it has to come from them. It has to be their data, using the data through their institutions to improve the education system. Otherwise, I don't think we're going to break the old colonial approach of us telling them what to do. So that's basically what we're trying to change.
Minutes.
back to that, before you answer that. Sorry, you're over here.
Yes.
Okay, how can I say this politely? So in the meantime, back to the education, the INAC area here.
Yes.
You're asking young people and young lives to put on hold and wait for AFN and the department to get together to fix the problem. So in the meantime, what are they supposed to do?
To Indigenous services.
I don't
All right.
think we're waiting. We've been working on child family services reform this year and made significant progress working towards the legislation. That's something we're trying to address. We have been investing a lot over the last few years on housing, which is also another determinant of what your result would be at the end on education. And as I said, the new formula is going to be coming up on 2019, but it doesn't stop us to not invest or to invest in the system. We have made significant investment over the last 2 years, but we have to understand, and you know that as much as me, that those results will take time to change. We also built up 14 new schools over the last 2-3 years. So we have been active. It's not as fast as you would like. It's not as fast as I would like, but it's as fast as we can, I can guarantee you.
The other.
So I would start by agreeing with you that the gaps and the conditions for many Indigenous peoples in Canada are unacceptable. I think that's why we are working so hard in our own way to change this program and make it better. When we have spent 1.5 years working directly with our Indigenous partners at all levels and leadership right down to the communities, engaging on how can we make this program better, how can it achieve more outcomes. They came back to us and they said, we're being asked for data that doesn't reflect the type of clients that we have. They said to us, the type of clients we're working with, what they need to do is move up the skills spectrum. They need to start with ready to learn. Then they need to work at pre-employability. And only then are they able to do some of the technical training. These are some of the clients that we work with. And yet you're asking us about how many jobs did they get? We got to start here and work more on skills development. And that's what we're going to do in the new ISET program. We're going to put the Indigenous program delivery people and leadership and communities and clients are in the driving seat in this program. They will design and deliver to better meet the needs of their clients through more emphasis on skills development, through co-developed performance indicators, not just based on, as Mr. Bartolet said before, draws attention from the community and its members to the requirements of government. No, we are co-developing with them so these indicators and these data and the way they design their program make sense to them. Let's be frank here, this program has been in place since 1999. Successive parliaments have not invested a single penny in it. In the meantime, population growth has gone up, inflation. So this is a professional service delivery network that has had no investment in it. We're changing that. We're investing in the service delivery capacity.
I know that we're very, very passionate. In our committee, we want to see success, and we want to see it yesterday. So I understand completely how members feel. Our next round of questions go to MP Will Amos.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks particularly to our civil servants working hard to both maintain accountability and improve our governance, but also to our department officials responding, because it does appear that there is a consequential response. I'm aware, as I'm sure all of you are, that the 2016 budget proposed $2.6 billion of investments over 5 years in primary and secondary education for Indigenous communities. And there are already 156 projects underway. So clearly investments are being made. But I think it's fair for Canadians to want the data collection around results to be done well. And I think that there's this is a fair conversation to be having. I'd like to get some more information on what kind of information and what kind of recommendations Indigenous representative organizations like AFN, but not limited to AFN, what recommendations they have made to Indigenous Services Canada around the manner they would that the data should be collected and what kind of data should be collected. We've got a sort of a sense, but I'm specifically looking to hear what are they saying as opposed to what is our response to what you've heard them say.
Maybe I will leave Paul, actually, who's been working with AFN on the development of the national outcomes and can discuss about the relationship with our partners in terms of data.
Thank you very much for the question. So part of the new fiscal relationship is trying to identify when do we declare victory on the elimination of the socioeconomic gap. But in order to do that, we need a combination of many things. Some of it is additional money. Some of it is essentially acknowledging that we can't impose anymore and we need to co-develop. So we have established a table whereby we have been talking about how do we co-develop the right indicators that are meaningful for First Nation community members, that for which is meaningful for tracking because they want to know themselves how their communities are doing in terms of education outcomes. And also acknowledging what they have been saying, which is minimizing the reporting burden, which is the collecting of all types of data that may be program compliance and input related, but not outcomes focused. So we've been trying to deal with both of those issues at the table. There's also an issue of regionality in this process. And while we'd like to talk about data collection from a national level, it's very clear that in this country, education is a provincial jurisdiction, and therefore there are regional issues. Also, from the AFN's perspective, there are regional frames that need to be respected as well. So those are just some of the issues that we are moving forward with, and that is why with some of Budget 2018 money, we have been working with the First Nations Information and Government Center to work through data, through regional centers across the country, 10 of them, to start developing a national roadmap on data collectively, for which education is the first out of the gate.
Thank you for that. I wonder if you could provide some more detail on the depth to which the department has gone to consult at the local level. I can understand that we've got representative organizations and institutions commenting, but for example, here in traditional Algonquin territory, the community of Kitigan Zibi that I represent here has been a leader on issues of education. In fact, people like Gilbert Whiteduck have worked very, very hard on this issue. Does the consultation that the department has gone through in order to determine how to improve data collection gathering, has that gone to that kind of local level, or has it remained more at the representative organization level?
It's actually a two-prong approach. So on the sectoral side, if I may use that word, programmatic basis, there is engagement process that is regional, national, and the region is doing it with the local communities on our behalf, and then we're also doing it horizontal through the new fiscal relationship initiative that also engages communities across the coast directly as well. Okay. So we're getting it two ways.
Okay, thank you for that. I take note of the Auditor General's report insofar as it clearly indicates that commitments around accessing education information system data, those commitments were made back in 2008. This is a long-standing promise, and clearly we're dealing with long-standing issues. In paragraph 10, you mentioned that the commitments to report on education results go back 18 years. So we're talking about a sequence of governments that have come and gone, and this is an issue that remains to be solved. Now we're in 2018, and quite recently, relatively recently, our country is committed to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and so Agenda 2030 is part of the mix. I wonder the extent to which both departments are looking at that those particular goals in the context of data collection and the closing of this gap. Thank you.
Paul will follow up on this, but it's a very good question. And actually, we are building the new framework in terms of data. The new version, if I could say, of the Community Wellbeing Index is actually based on the United Nations Sustainable Development Framework. So that's actually the core of this. So if Paul wants to add up.
We've been trying to find a frame that works for both sides in terms of data and indicators. And obviously, we have the historical baggage of the colonial approach of Ottawa defining based on what Ottawa wants and what it needs, and not necessarily what the community needs. That being said, there is a lot of mistrust. So what we have been using has been the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as a neutral, independent, third-party frame of the collection of indicators that has received buy-in from First Nation communities to get past the historical legacy. And therefore, we have been developing indicators under that frame on a mutual accountability perspective to identify what are those right indicators and therefore and not ask for unnecessary data related to that issue I had flagged earlier about the reporting burden that we have created in the past through the contribution agreements.
Thank you. We're going to move on to MP Kathy McLeod.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to all the witnesses. And I just want to say I know that Public Accounts gave it 2 hours for the Auditor General and the department officials, and to for this committee who's actually responsible for this file, for my colleagues not to support a reasonable time frame is really concerning to me, and I think it shows a lack of concern in terms of what I think was a report that had some issues that we needed as parliamentarians. We needed an opportunity to ask the important questions because we have a responsibility. So I'm going to start. I think we have two things that are happening. One is we have a shift, and I think it's an important shift in terms of First Nations control of First Nations education, and the government sort of removing itself from that particular work. On the other hand, we have this, this need that the Auditor General clearly showed us in terms of the sort of bad use of data, not using the data that was available, and not really having indicators that were doing the job that we needed them to do. My question at Public Accounts last week, and I'm wondering, if we have an answer to that yet, so with the Anishinaabe Education Agreement, which we all passed in this legislature, with the newly released agreement in terms of British Columbia that you alluded to, what are the commitments around data collection so that other communities can know if that self-government model, to what degree they're going to be able to compare apples and apples, and to what degree it's moving forward? Or is there no sort of commitments around that particular issue? So I would ask if you have the answer to that now.
As we mentioned, on the agreements like the school boards or, for example, the BC one, we sit down with them and we agree on the set of indicators. So if you look at the agreement, there's a list of indicators that they committed to report.
Within the Anishinaabe agreement?
Within the Anishinaabe, it's hard for me to comment on all the self-government agreements because I don't necessarily negotiate them, and each of them is...
Yeah, but I did bring it up at Public Accounts last week, and you agreed to get back to us.
Yes. And we are working with our friends who are negotiating those ones. But I can give you example of what we see with the self-government agreements. For example, if you look at in the Atlantic, there is an annual report that is there on the web, and it does include classic information like enrollment, absenteeism, and graduate rates.
So I guess what I'm getting at, and I had hoped that this week there would be an answer, is it's great that there's going to be information posted, but it's not going to mesh with information from British Columbia or from other provinces. So for, let's say a new group is looking at doing the same thing as the Anishinaabe, they're not going to have the ability to look at, they'll be doing it in isolation from everything else. So it'll be separate standalone data. So I guess maybe I need to go to Mr. Berthollet. you indicated as we get to that transfer relationship that basically maybe parliamentarians, once it's like a province, we hand the money over, do we need to continue to worry about comparing data results when we're at that stage, or to what degree do parliamentarians need to be focused on this issue as we go through this transition?
A minute to give that profound response.
I think it would be an incumbent on Parliament, Madam Chair, and the members of Parliament to always be interested and concerned about what goes on with respect to Indigenous peoples' relationships with the rest of Canada. While we may arrive at a point where we have a government-to-government relationship, that means it's government-to-government. I think that means there's a role that MPs will continue to play in terms of maintaining, reinforcing, and sustaining that relationship. So, in a short answer, I see a role for MPs and Parliament continuing into the future, and I see that role as being one of supporting the other government in helping them achieve their goals.
Thank you.
Okay, you have 15 seconds. All right. We're moving on to the next presenters. I understand it's split time, and we're going to start with MP Robillard.
Merci, Madame la Présidente, et merci aux témoins.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank the witnesses for their testimony. My question will be in French. The question for the Assistant Auditor General, with respect to your auditing methods, you visited and questioned 7 communities in 2 regions.
That our hour is up, and our MP, our friend Kathy McLeod, has pointed out that our time is run out unless MPs wish to change it, but we addressed this issue when we began the meeting.
Can I ask for a point of order to get a chance to submit some questions to the various departments to get a chance to get written responses? I just want to submit the questions.
We have done that before, and I think that that would be within the committee's general practice. Absolutely. So I am so sorry. We can't continue with further questioning because we've actually hit the 1-hour timeline. And so on behalf of the committee, merci, thank you, Miigwech, for coming out. Obviously, there is a lot of passion and interest in this topic. ESDC got off easy, and but I'm sure that as we look at the next study, we'll be back to you, to the Auditor General. Thank you so much for raising these important issues. We're now going to move into an in-camera session, so I want to thank all of our guests and those attending for coming out. Suspend.
you.